My toxic younger sister said at the birthday party, family is honestly embarrassed to have you share the Harper name. Mom nodded, Dad curled his lips in agreement. I just sat there, silently sipping my wine. Suddenly, Grandma stood up and spoke one single sentence. Instantly, my sister's face went pale. The crystal chandelier in my parents' dining room had always intimidated me as a child. Now, at 32, sitting beneath its cold glitter while my younger sister Caroline delivered her verdict on my existence, I found myself studying each individual prism with strange detachment. I mean, let's be honest, Caroline continued, her voice carrying that particular pitch of manufactured concern she'd perfected over the years. The family is honestly embarrassed to have you share the Harper name. I took another sip of wine. A 2018 Bordeaux that my father had selected specifically for this celebration of his 60th birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could identify the vintage while my sister probably thought it came from a box. My mother, Patricia, nodded slowly from her position at the head of the table. Her pearls caught the light as she tilted her chin in that way she had, the gesture that communicated disappointment without requiring words. My father, Douglas, curled his lips in what might have been agreement or indigestion. With him, it was always hard to tell. Caroline, that's enough, my grandmother Ruth said quietly from the far end of the table. But my sister was on a roll now, emboldened by our parents' silent approval. I'm just saying what everyone thinks. She's 32 and what does she have to show for it? A rental apartment in Queens, a job at some no-name nonprofit, and let's not even discuss her dating life. I set down my wine glass with deliberate care. The dining room had gone silent except for the gentle clink of ice in someone's water glass. My cousin Jessica looked uncomfortable, her husband Patrick suddenly fascinated by his phone. My uncle Gerald and Aunt Maureen exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Caroline wore a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Her engagement ring from her fiancé Trevor probably cost more than my car. She'd graduated from Columbia with a degree in marketing and immediately landed a position at our father's investment firm, where she'd risen through the ranks with what she called hard work and what I called nepotism. You know what your problem is? Caroline leaned forward, her blonde highlights gleaming. You've never understood what it means to be a Harper. You walked away from the family business to go work with homeless people. You embarrass us at social functions with your secondhand dresses and your ridiculous idealism. Trevor's parents asked me last week if you were adopted. The words should have stung. Maybe 5 years ago, they would have. But I'd spent the past decade building something that mattered, something Caroline would never understand with her expense account lunches and her Instagram influencer aspirations. Are you quite finished? I asked calmly. Caroline's eyes flashed. See? This is exactly what I mean. No fire, no passion. You just sit there like some kind of martyr, taking it all, making the rest of us look bad with your silent judgment. I said, that's enough. My grandmother's voice cut through the room like a knife. Ruth Harper was 84 years old and commanded more respect in her pinky finger than my parents had accumulated in their entire lives. She'd built Harper Properties from nothing after my grandfather died, turning a struggling real estate business into an empire worth hundreds of millions. She'd retired 10 years ago, handing control to my father, who'd managed to keep it afloat without destroying it entirely. Grandma, I'm just being honest, Caroline protested. Someone needs to say it. Honest? My grandmother set down her fork. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. You want to discuss honesty at your father's birthday dinner? Something in her tone made my father go pale. I watched, fascinated, as my mother's hand crept up to clutch her pearls. Mother, perhaps we should, my father began. Be quiet, Douglas. Ruth's eyes were ice. Your daughter wants to discuss what it means to be a Harper. I think it's time we had that conversation. She pushed back her chair and stood, all 5 feet 2 inches of her. Every eye in the room fixed on her with a kind of attention usually reserved for natural disasters. You say your sister embarrasses this family, Caroline. You believe that working at a nonprofit, helping people who have nothing, is somehow shameful. You think that wearing expensive clothes and marrying into money makes you worthy of the Harper name. Caroline's confidence was beginning to crack. I just meant that. I know exactly what you meant. Ruth's gaze swept the table, landing on my parents. And shame on both of you for allowing this to continue. Shame on you for nodding along while one daughter tears down another. My mother's face had gone white. Ruth, you're overreacting, am I? My grandmother's laugh was bitter. Let me tell you all something about your successful, accomplished, disappointing daughter sitting there so quietly. She moved to stand behind my chair, her hand resting on my shoulder. I felt the weight of it, steady and sure. 6 years ago, Natalie came to me. Not to her parents, who were too busy grooming Caroline for greatness. She came to me with a proposal. She'd been working at a nonprofit in Queens, managing their programs, and she'd identified a systemic problem with how homeless services were being delivered in New York. She had a solution, but she needed capital. My heart began to pound. We'd agreed to keep this quiet. We'd both agreed. I gave her $2 million as seed funding, Ruth continued. She promised she'd pay me back within 5 years, with interest. I told her she was family and that wasn't necessary, but she insisted. Caroline's mouth had fallen open. My father looked like he might be having a stroke. 8 months ago, Natalie paid me back in full. $2 million plus $600,000 in interest. The nonprofit she started, Haven House Collective, now operates in 12 cities. They've housed over 3,000 families, provided job training to 5,000 people, and pioneered a model that's being copied nationwide. That's impossible, my mother whispered. She lives in a rental apartment. Because she pays herself a modest salary and lives within her means, Ruth said sharply. Unlike some people at this table who spend money they didn't earn on things they don't need to impress people they don't like. The silence that followed was deafening. Last month, Ruth continued, Natalie was approached by a philanthropic investment consortium. They offered to provide $48 million in acquisition funding to take Haven House National under their umbrella. She turned them down because she didn't want to risk the mission being compromised. However, she did accept the Thornton Foundation's offer to fund a national expansion as an independent partner. In 2 years, Haven House will operate in all 50 states. I could feel everyone staring at me. I'd never wanted this moment, this exposure. The work was what mattered, not the recognition. You want to know what embarrasses me about this family? Ruth's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. It's not Natalie's choice to serve others instead of herself. It's that her own parents are so shallow, so consumed with appearances, that they can't see they have a daughter who's achieved something actually meaningful. Mother, we didn't know, my father began. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't care. You were too busy parading Caroline around to your country club friends, bragging about her engagement to a trust fund baby whose greatest accomplishment is not getting arrested for insider trading yet. Trevor, who'd been quiet until now, made a choking sound. Caroline grabbed his arm, her face scarlet. I've watched this family lose its way, Ruth said, her voice heavy with disappointment. When your grandfather and I started Harper Properties, we did it to build something that would provide for our family, yes, but also to create jobs, to revitalize neighborhoods, to matter. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that, Douglas. You turned it into just another vehicle for accumulating wealth and status. She squeezed my shoulder once, then released it. Natalie is the only one of you who remembered what it actually means to be a Harper. She took everything I taught her about business and used it to help people who actually need it. She's been featured in Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and next month she's speaking at the Clinton Global Initiative. And you know how I know all this? Because I pay attention to business media. I read newspapers. I don't assume that my version of success is the only version that matters. My grandmother moved back to her seat, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she picked up her purse. I came to this dinner tonight planning to announce my new will, she said. I was going to split my personal estate equally between my 2 granddaughters. But after tonight's performance, I think I need to reconsider. Grandma, wait, Caroline's voice had lost all its earlier confidence. I'm tired, Ruth said simply. And I'm ashamed of what this family has become. Natalie, would you walk me to my car? I stood on shaking legs. Every face at the table was frozen in various expressions of shock, horror, and belated understanding. My mother looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. My father had his head in his hands. Caroline's face had gone from red to pale, her eyes glistening with tears that I suspected had more to do with inheritance than actual remorse. I followed my grandmother through the house I'd grown up in, past the photos of Caroline's achievements that lined the hallway, past my mother's collection of china that had never been used for anything meaningful. Outside, the evening air was cool and carried the scent of my mother's roses. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. Ruth turned to face me, and for the first time all evening, she smiled. Yes, I did. I should have done it years ago. I kept hoping they'd figure it out on their own, that they'd see what you were accomplishing and feel proud instead of dismissive. I was wrong to wait. I don't want to split the family apart. Sweetheart, they did that all on their own. She cupped my face with her weathered hands. You're exactly who your grandfather and I hoped you'd be. You took what we taught you and made it better, made it matter more. That's the greatest compliment you could have given us. Tears burned in my eyes. I miss him. So do I every day. She smiled sadly. But he'd be so proud of you. Probably prouder of you than he would have been of me, because you're doing the hard work, the work that doesn't come with accolades and country club memberships. Some days I wonder if I made a mistake. If I should have just done what they wanted. And some days I wonder if I should have sold Harper Properties and become a painter in Paris, Ruth laughed. But we both know we chose exactly the right paths for ourselves. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Especially not people who measure success in dollar signs and social media followers. She got into her car, the same practical sedan she'd driven for 10 years despite being able to afford any vehicle she wanted. I meant what I said in there about reconsidering my will. Not as punishment, but because I want my money to go where it'll do the most good. We'll talk. I watched her drive away, then turned back toward the house. Through the dining room windows, I could see my family still frozen at the table, the birthday cake untouched in front of my father. My phone buzzed. A text from my deputy director at Haven House, just confirmed. Chicago expansion approved. We start construction next month. This is happening because of you. Thank you. I smiled and tucked the phone away. Then I walked back inside. The dining room erupted when I entered. My mother started crying, my father demanded explanations, Caroline launched into a defensive speech about how she'd had no idea and how proud she was really. Trevor tried to congratulate me while simultaneously explaining that he'd always respected what I was doing. I let the noise wash over me for a moment, then held up my hand. The room fell silent. I'm going to say this once, I began, my voice steady. I didn't keep my work quiet because I was ashamed of it or because I needed some dramatic reveal. I kept it quiet because it wasn't about proving anything to any of you. It was about the work itself. It still is. I looked at Caroline, who couldn't meet my eyes. I don't expect an apology. I don't need one. But I do expect you to understand that your version of success isn't universal. Some of us measure our worth differently. Natalie, honey, we had no idea, my mother began. You had no idea because you never asked. In 10 years, none of you ever asked what I actually did at my job. You assumed because I wasn't making money hand over fist that it wasn't important. That says more about your values than mine. My father cleared his throat. Your grandmother was right. We should have paid more attention. I should have paid more attention. Yes, you should have. I picked up my purse. But I'm not going to stand here and catalog all the ways you failed to see me. That's not productive for anyone. Where are you going? My mother asked, her voice small. Home. I have an early meeting tomorrow with the mayor's office about our Brooklyn expansion. Stay, my father said. Please. We should talk about this. I looked around the table at these people I'd known my whole life. My parents, who'd spent decades caring more about appearances than substance. My sister, who'd built her identity on being better than me without ever actually examining what better meant. My extended family, who'd watched it all happen and said nothing. Maybe we can talk another time, I said. When you've had a chance to think about what you really want to say. Caroline stood abruptly. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much right now, but I am. I was cruel and I was wrong and I have no excuse. I studied her face, looking for sincerity beneath the tears. You're 28 years old, Caroline. You're old enough to know that tearing someone down doesn't build you up. I hope you figure that out before you marry Trevor and have kids who you'll inevitably compare to each other. Her face crumpled, but I didn't take it back. Some truths needed to be spoken, even when they hurt. I left without ceremony, walking out into the night air. My phone rang before I reached my car. Ruth. I'm proud of you, she said without preamble. For leaving. For knowing when to walk away. Learned from the best. Come to lunch tomorrow. I want to hear about the Chicago expansion. I'd love that. I drove back to Queens, to my rental apartment with its secondhand furniture and its walls covered in photos of Haven House clients who'd rebuilt their lives. The apartment complex where Mrs. Rodriguez now lived after 3 years of homelessness. The graduation photo of Marcus, who'd gotten his GED and was now in community college. The family portrait of the Nguyens, who'd arrived with nothing and now owned their own restaurant. These were my measures of success. These were my trophies. My phone buzzed again. Caroline, this time, can we talk? Really talk? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, not tonight. Maybe next week. If you're serious about understanding. I am, came the immediate reply. Then we'll see. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine, kicked off my shoes and curled up on my couch. The cushions were worn and the springs creaked, but it was mine. Everything in this apartment I'd earned myself, built myself, chosen myself. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying the dinner in my mind, not Caroline's cruelty but the look on my parents' faces when Ruth revealed everything. The shock had been genuine. So had the shame that followed. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, I just felt tired. Around 2 a.m, my phone lit up with an email. The subject line read, "Tonight's events, your father." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. Natalie, I'm writing this because I don't trust myself to say it properly in person. Your grandmother was right about everything. I've spent the last 3 hours sitting in my study, looking through old photos of you as a child. There's one from your 8th birthday where you insisted we donate all your presents to a children's hospital. Your mother was horrified. I thought it was a phase. But it wasn't, was it? That's always been who you are. I'm sorry it took me 60 years and a public humiliation to see what was right in front of me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday we can start over. Dad. I read it 3 times before setting the phone down. The word dad at the end broke something loose in my chest. He usually signed everything Douglas Harper, even if the family. The next few days brought an avalanche of consequences I hadn't anticipated. My Uncle Gerald called to congratulate me and apologize for staying silent at dinner. My cousin Jessica sent flowers with a card that said, "Always knew you were the coolest, Harper." Even my Aunt Maureen, who'd never particularly liked me, left a voicemail praising my accomplishments. But the most surprising call came from Trevor. "I need to tell you something," he said without preamble when I answered. "Caroline and I had a massive fight after you left." She was furious with me for not defending her, but honestly, I was too shocked to process what had happened. I've been thinking about it nonstop since. "Trevor, you don't owe me an explanation." "Yes, I do. Because I've been complicit in how she treats you. I've laughed at her jokes about your lifestyle choices. I've rolled my eyes when she complained about having to attend family events where you'd be present. I never once asked myself why she felt so threatened by you." I sat down on my office desk, surprised by his honesty. "She's not threatened by me." "Of course she is. She's been competing with a ghost her whole life. You've never engaged with her rivalry, which somehow makes it worse for her. She kept waiting for you to fight back, to prove you cared about the same things she does. When you never did, it made her look shallow by comparison. That's not my fault." "No, it isn't. But I'm starting to realize that I enabled her worst impulses because it was easier than challenging them. I'm not sure that's the kind of person I want to be." He paused. "Or the kind of person I want to marry." "Are you having second thoughts about the engagement?" "I'm having second thoughts about everything. Look, I don't expect us to be friends or anything. I just wanted you to know that what your grandmother said hit home for me too. Sometimes we need someone to hold up a mirror and show us who we've become." After he hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The fallout from one dinner party was rippling out in ways I never could have predicted. Work became my refuge over the following days. We had a site visit scheduled in Brooklyn for a potential new location, and I threw myself into the logistics. The property was a former warehouse that could be converted into transitional housing units with attached job training facilities. Standing in the empty space, I could already envision what it would become. "This is perfect," Maria said, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "We could house 40 families here easily, maybe more if we built vertically. And the ground floor could be our training center," I added. "Commercial kitchen on the east side, computer lab on the west, counseling offices in between." We spent 2 hours measuring, planning, dreaming. This was what I loved about the work. Every empty building was a possibility. Every vacant lot could become a new beginning for someone who desperately needed one. My phone rang just as we were wrapping up. "Ruth. How busy are you right now?" she asked. "Just finished a site visit." "Why?" "Because I'm sitting in my lawyer's office and I'd like you to join me. There are some things we need to discuss about the future." 40 minutes later, I sat in a leather chair in a mahogany-paneled office overlooking Central Park. Ruth's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Preston, slid a document across the desk. "Your grandmother has asked me to draft a new estate plan," Margaret said. "She wanted you present for this conversation." I looked at Ruth. "You don't have to do this." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She folded her hands in her lap. "Margaret, please explain the new structure." "Mrs. Harper is establishing the Ruth and Henry Harper Foundation, named for herself and her late husband. The foundation will be funded with the bulk of her personal estate, approximately $85 million. The foundation's mission will be to support housing initiatives and economic empowerment programs." My head spun. "Grandma, let her finish," Ruth said gently. Margaret continued, "You will be named as the founding director of the foundation, with full control over grant-making decisions and strategic direction. Your sister Caroline will receive a personal bequest of $5 million. Your parents will remain as trustees of the family business but will have no control over the foundation funds." "What about you?" I asked Ruth. "What do you keep?" "Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, which at 84 probably won't be as long as any of us would like." She smiled. "I don't need much, Natalie. I never have. Your grandfather and I lived well below our means for most of our marriage. The money was never the point. But $85 million is sitting in accounts earning interest while people sleep on the street. Henry would have hated that. He always said money was meant to move, to do things, to solve problems. This is how I want our legacy to continue. Through you. I looked down at the document, the legal language swimming before my eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do it justice. Say you'll use it to expand Haven House beyond anything we've imagined. Say you'll prove to the world that the Harper name means something worth being proud of. I will, I whispered. I promise I will. Margaret walked me through the details. The foundation would be structured as a public charity, allowing for tax-advantaged giving. There would be a board of directors, but I would have majority voting power. The principal would remain intact while the investment returns funded grants and programs. This could generate $3.5 to $4 million annually in grant funding, Margaret explained. Assuming conservative investment returns of around 4 to 5%. $5 million a year. I thought about how many families we could house, how many jobs we could create, how many lives we could change. The scale of it was overwhelming. After we finished, Ruth and I walked through Central Park together. Fall had arrived, painting the leaves in shades of amber and gold. We didn't speak for several minutes, just walked. Your grandfather proposed to me in this park, Ruth said eventually. Right over there, by the bow bridge. He didn't have a ring. He'd spent all his money on a down payment for our first property. I said yes anyway. Did you ever regret it? Marrying him instead of someone wealthier? Never once. Henry was the richest man I ever knew, and it had nothing to do with money. He was rich in integrity, in kindness, in vision. He saw potential where others saw problems. He saw people where others saw statistics. She squeezed my arm. You're just like him? That's why I know the foundation will be exactly what it should be. We stopped at a bench and sat down. A young mother pushed a stroller past us, her toddler running ahead on unsteady legs. Ruth watched them with a soft smile. I was hard on your parents the other night, she said. Perhaps too hard. They deserved it. Maybe. But I'm realizing now that I failed them too. I was so focused on building the business, on ensuring financial security, that I didn't teach them the values that mattered. I gave them wealth without wisdom. That's on me. You can't blame yourself for their choices. I don't. But I can acknowledge my role in shaping those choices. She turned to look at me. That's why this foundation matters so much. It's my chance to get it right. To show them, and anyone else paying attention, what our family should have been about all along. No pressure, I said with a weak laugh. She laughed too, the sound bright in the autumn air. You've already proven yourself 10 times over, sweetheart. This is just giving you the resources to dream bigger. Walking back to my car later, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. $85 million. The number kept repeating in my mind like a mantra. With that kind of funding, we could transform Haven House from a growing nonprofit into a national force. We could influence policy, fund research, create models that other organizations could replicate. But I also knew the scrutiny that would come with it. Every decision would be examined. Every grant would be questioned. My family's dysfunction would become public knowledge as soon as the foundation launched. Caroline's cruelty at the dinner party would be analyzed by board members and donors alike. The thought made me queasy, but I pushed it aside. This was bigger than family drama. This was about the thousands of families who needed help, who deserved better than a society that had failed them. My phone rang. My mother. I saw your grandmother today, she said. She told me about the foundation. And I'm happy for you. Truly happy. This is exactly what that money should be used for. She paused. I also wanted you to know that your father and I have been talking. We've made some decisions about our own giving. You don't need to do that to impress me, Mom. It's not about impressing you. It's about finally living our values instead of just talking about them. We're establishing a donor-advised fund. We'll be making grants to organizations working on homelessness and housing insecurity. Your father is also committing Harper Properties to below-market rate housing development in underserved communities. I nearly dropped my phone. Dad agreed to that? It was his idea, actually. He spent last night reading through 20 years of Harper Properties' annual reports. He said he couldn't find a single development that actually helped people who needed it most. Everything we built was luxury condos and high-end office space. He wants to change that. What brought this on? Your grandmother told him that he had a choice. He could spend the rest of his life being the son who disappointed her, or he could become the son she always hoped he'd be. It's never too late, she said, to decide who you want to be. After hanging up, I leaned against my car and let the tears come. Not tears of sadness but of something I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Or the simple recognition that change was actually possible, even for people who'd spent decades living one way. The week that followed was a blur of meetings, planning sessions, and late-night strategy conversations with my team. News of the foundation had leaked somehow, and reporters were calling for interviews. I declined most of them, not ready for the spotlight that would inevitably come. But I did agree to meet with a journalist from the New York Times who'd been following Haven House's work for years. We sat in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, and she asked thoughtful questions about our expansion plans and funding model. "What made you choose this work?" she asked toward the end of our conversation. I thought about how to answer that. I grew up with everything. Every advantage, every opportunity, every safety net. And I watched my family use all those resources for themselves, to accumulate more, to climb higher on ladders that ultimately led nowhere meaningful. I wanted to use what I'd been given for something that mattered beyond my own comfort. Your grandmother's foundation will give you unprecedented resources. How will you ensure you don't lose sight of the mission? By remembering where I started. By staying connected to the families we serve. By measuring success in lives changed, not dollars managed. I leaned forward. Money is just a tool. It's what you build with it that matters. I never want to forget that. The article ran the following Sunday, a full-page feature with photos of Haven House locations and families we'd served. My phone exploded with messages from donors, partners, and organizations wanting to collaborate. The foundation hadn't even officially launched yet, and we were already being flooded with opportunities. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find my team already buzzing with energy. Maria had the Chicago blueprints spread across the conference table. James was on the phone with our construction partners. Sarah was updating our donor database with the latest contributions. "Boss, you're not going to believe this," Maria said, waving me over. 3 more cities reached out overnight wanting to partner with us. Denver, Portland, and Austin. I studied the blueprints, making notes on the margins. We'll need to hire regional directors for each. Start drafting the job postings and I'll review them this afternoon. I'll have them ready by end of day. She grinned. I know how you work. The day unfolded in the familiar rhythm of meaningful work. Strategy sessions, donor calls, site visits, staff meetings. Around 3 o'clock, my assistant knocked on my door. "Your mother is here," she said, her expression carefully neutral. I looked up from my laptop. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." I did. She said she'll wait. I sighed. Fine. Send her in. Patricia Harper entered my office like she was inspecting it for code violations. Her eyes swept over the metal desk, the filing cabinets, the wall of photographs, the window that looked out onto a busy Queens Street. "This is where you work," she said. It wasn't a question. "This is where I work." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, her posture perfect as always. "Your grandmother called me this morning. She was quite explicit about her disappointment in how your father and I have treated you." I'm sure that was a pleasant conversation. It wasn't. My mother's hands twisted in her lap, a rare break in her composure. She told me things I should have known. Things I would have known if I'd been paying attention. I waited. "The Clinton Global Initiative," she continued. "The Forbes profile. The expansion into 12 cities. Natalie, why didn't you tell us? Would you have cared?" The question came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take it back. She flinched. "I deserved that." "You did." I know an apology isn't enough. I know I can't undo years of dismissiveness and neglect with a single conversation. But I need you to understand something. She looked at me directly for the first time. I was wrong. About everything. About what matters, about what success looks like, about who you are and what you're capable of. "Why are you really here, Mom?" "Because I'm ashamed." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm ashamed that a stranger reading Forbes knows more about my daughter's accomplishments than I do. I'm ashamed that I let Caroline speak to you that way. I'm ashamed that I nodded like some kind of mindless puppet instead of defending you." Tears were running down her face now, streaking her makeup. I'd never seen my mother cry. Not at funerals, not at weddings, not ever. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "But I want to try. If you let me." I leaned back in my chair, studying this woman who'd raised me without ever really seeing me. "It's going to take time. I understand. And I'm not going to change who I am or what I do to make you more comfortable. I wouldn't want you to. And you need to understand that my work is my priority. Not Sunday dinners, not country club events, not keeping up appearances for your friends." "I know." I pulled out a folder from my desk drawer. "This is our annual report. Read it. All of it. Then come back and we'll talk about whether you actually understand what I'm building here." She took the folder with trembling hands. "Thank you." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, watching the street below. A family walked past, the mother pushing a stroller, the father holding a toddler's hand. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, just trying to get by. That night, Ruth called again. "How did it go with your mother?" She cried. Apologized. I gave her homework. My grandmother laughed. Good. Make her work for it. How are you holding up? Honestly? I'm exhausted. This is why I kept the work separate from the family drama. The work has outgrown your ability to keep it hidden. Better to control the narrative now than have it explode later. Spoken like a true businesswoman. I learned from experience. When Harper Properties started getting real attention, I tried to keep it quiet too. Didn't want people thinking I was showing off or getting above myself. Your grandfather finally sat me down and said, Ruth, hiding your light doesn't make anyone else shine brighter. It just makes the room darker. I smiled. I miss his wisdom. So do I bet you have it in you, sweetheart? You always have. The weeks that followed were strange. My mother read the annual report, then scheduled a meeting to ask questions. Actual questions about our funding model, our client outcomes, our expansion strategy. My father reached out to offer financial connections in cities where we were expanding. Caroline sent a series of increasingly thoughtful text messages about how she'd been forced to examine her own life choices. I responded to all of it cautiously, letting them prove their sincerity through actions rather than words. Ruth and I had lunch every Sunday. She wanted to hear about every aspect of Haven House, offering advice from her decades of business experience. She also wanted to hear about my life beyond work, asking about friends and hobbies and whether I was dating anyone. I'm too busy for a relationship, I told her one afternoon. That's what I said at your age. Then I met your grandfather at a zoning board meeting where we were both fighting the same corrupt developer. Sometimes the right person shows up when you're busy doing the right thing. 3 months after the disastrous birthday dinner, my parents hosted another family gathering. This time, it was to celebrate Haven House's national expansion announcement. The dining room table held charts and graphs about our projected impact. My mother had invited the local newspaper to cover it. My father gave a speech about how proud he was, though I could see the regret in his eyes that he was coming to this pride so late. Caroline cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling drinks. I broke up with Trevor. I looked at her in surprise. What happened? I started actually paying attention to who he was instead of what he represented. Turns out he's pretty terrible, she laughed, but it was tinged with sadness. I think I knew it all along. I just liked the idea of the perfect engagement, the perfect wedding, the perfect life. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right choice. She hesitated. I was wondering if you might need help with Haven House. I have marketing experience and I've been thinking about doing something that actually matters. I studied her carefully. This isn't a charity case, Caroline. If you come work with us, you'll be expected to actually work. Long hours, modest pay, difficult problems. I know. I want to try anyway. Why? She met my eyes. Because watching you these past months, seeing what you've built, I realized I've been chasing the wrong things my whole life. I want to know what it feels like to matter for the right reasons. I thought about it for a long moment. We could use someone to head up our communications department. It would mean managing our public relations, donor communications, social media presence. Interested? Her face lit up. Really? On a trial basis. 3 months. We'll see if it's a good fit for both of us. She hugged me suddenly, fiercely. Thank you for giving me a chance. I won't waste it. See that you don't. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in Queens at the National Housing Coalition's annual conference, accepting their Visionary Leadership Award for Haven House's work in combating homelessness. My grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. My parents were there too, recording every moment on their phones. Caroline was backstage, managing the media requests that had been flooding in. In my acceptance speech, I talked about the families we'd served, the lives we'd changed, the communities we'd strengthened. I talked about the importance of measuring success by impact rather than income. I talked about my grandfather's belief that business should serve people, not the other way around. And I talked about my grandmother, who believed in me when I had nothing but an idea and a determination to help. Ruth Harper taught me that true wealth isn't counted in dollars, I said, finding her in the audience. It's counted in lives touched, communities strengthened, and problems solved. She taught me that the Harper name isn't about status or appearances. It's about using whatever resources and talents you have to make the world a little bit better than you found it. The applause was thunderous, but all I cared about was the tears streaming down my grandmother's face and the way she placed her hand over her heart. That evening, at the reception, my mother pulled me aside. I've been thinking about something, she said. Your father and I own a building in Manhattan that's been sitting empty. What would you think about using it for a Haven House location? I stared at her. Mom, that building is worth millions. I know. Consider it an investment in work that actually matters. She smiled, and for the first time in my memory, it reached her eyes. I'm finally learning what my mother-in-law tried to teach me years ago. Some things are worth more than their market value. As I looked around the reception, at my family who'd finally learned to see me, at my team who'd worked so hard to make this moment possible, at the representatives from cities across America who wanted to partner with Haven House, I felt something I hadn't felt in my parents' dining room in years. I felt proud to be a Harper. Not because of the name or the money or the connections, but because I'd finally shown them what the name could really mean when you used it for something beyond yourself. Ruth appeared at my elbow, champagne in hand. Your grandfather would have loved this moment. I wish he could have seen it. He sees it, sweetheart. And he's proud. She raised her glass. To using our names for something worth remembering. I clinked my glass against hers. To family learning what actually matters. Even if it takes them a little while to figure it out. We stood there together, the matriarch who built an empire and the granddaughter who transformed it into something better, watching my family finally understand that the greatest legacy we could leave wasn't measured in inheritance or status. It was measured in lives changed, one person at a time, until the whole world shifted just a little bit closer to what it should be. And that was worth more than all the crystal chandeliers and country club memberships money could buy.